through. They have to go in through the groin up into the heart. It's 4 hours long. It's a long procedure.
Yeah, so that's going to be.
And for me, it worked.
Also,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Go ahead.
So, and then we have finally a deputy controller whose role it is to oversee any of the New York City related matters. Their office is very much separate. On top of that, the controller himself is the sole trustee for the New York State pension, which I can assure everybody here, the pension system is doing very well. It's fully funded. Nobody has to worry. There's, you're a town employee who hopefully have a very long and happy retirement, will be well looked after he retires. And what we're focusing on right now, as the controller has said many times, so we're looking at the person who's going to start working at the village tomorrow. The next person who's going to become an employee, and then in 15 to 20 years, when they are finished being a New York State public employee, will be looking for their pension that they were promised 15 years earlier. So I'm here really to be your advocate and connection to the office of the state controller, to help in any way that I can, and to be your liaison back and forth to the office. There are a lot of different villages and municipalities in Orange County, and everyone has their own different approach to governance, and everyone has their own unique set of issues. What works for Tuxedo Park is not going to work for Montgomery. It's not going to work for Wallkill. It's not going to work for Port Jervis. It's not going to work for Wawayanda. It's not going to work for any of those places.
Sure. With respect to the audits, my understanding there are different types of audits, and in 2018, it was a board audit.
Yes.
A board audit, my understanding, and I don't know that much about it, is separate and apart from a financial audit.
Correct.
Okay.
So certain times the audits have different scopes.
Mhm.
Oftentimes they are looked at from a financial perspective. I can't give a lot of examples behind it because some of our more recent audits haven't been released yet, but I'll give an audit that we do every year. That is an example. Every year we audit the budget of the city of Yonkers. Every year we do that audit, and we look at their books. We also do an audit of the city of Newburgh, and we do those every year. Those are financial audits to look at the health and the fiscal condition of those two cities. Whereas you can look at a different audit, for example, I think we did a audit on, trying to remember another example. It's not Tuxedo Park. That's not financial. I think we did an audit actually on North Salem, in the town of North Salem, which was not financial. It had to do with economics of farmers, because they have a lot of farmland up in North Salem. So it's not the same thing. So our audits can be very wide in their scope. What I often describe as a little bit of the process is, I'll say Village of Tuxedo wanted to do a review of the financials of the village. So that's a very broad perspective. They'll go into sort of a 10,000 foot view, and if they see something that's a little more specific, they might hone in on that, and that would be a different component to the audit. But it also depends on what we're looking for. If you're looking for something specific, that's also a different part of the conversation. But our audits tend to start out very wide and then hone in on something specific.
In terms of a financial audit, what's the waiting list? In other words, do you get on a list and do you have to wait 6 months to a year?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
We have a long list of audits
that haven't begun,
haven't been released, things like that. It is a long list. What I also tell people, though, is part of the benefit of doing it this way, as opposed to going through a different series of channels, is I make the request of you as a newly elected mayor of the village of Tuxedo Park.
Right.
That does tend to help potentially move things along. It also does benefit the fact that you haven't been audited in the last 5 years. So that is something that's also worth considering. It all depends on the circumstances. So if that is something, again, that there is real consideration and interest in doing in 2024 or beyond, that is something that we can absolutely do. I will point out, we are just announced the new head of our local government school accountability office, who would actually conduct the audit in the first place. She is yet to get fully started, but the plans for 2024 are not set for their audit plan. So there is some opportunity if there's interest and there's desire from you and the rest of the board to push this forward.
Well, that leads to a follow-up question. Does the audit request require a resolution from the full board?
No.
Or is it one that's made by the mayor alone?
Neither.
Okay, how does that work?
You make the request directly to me.
Right.
And I've had requests made by mayors. I've had requests made by village board members alike.
Mhm.
And once the request is made, then I start my internal process of filing that request. And then from there, it's taken sort of out of my hands, and then it's reviewed by the local government school accountability office. And they decide if it can be fit into the schedule, what that would look like, and things like that. And then I also work with it's called the regional office, with our regional chief. And I, will sometimes have conversations with her about, this is what we talked about. This would be an interesting idea that haven't been looked at in 5 years, and try and get the audit on the calendar as best I can.
So what you're saying is any of the elected officials can make an individual request for an audit?
Correct.
Okay. Now, most importantly to Elizabeth, we're in a very small office here. She works very hard and is
Yes.
overworked. How much of her time would be taken away or involved in any sort of financial audit?
That's a great question. I can't speak to the practices of the auditors themselves because I am not one of them, and there's a very good reason for that. Math was not my strong suit. But I can speak to them and their character. They try and be as unobtrusive as possible. They try and be as helpful as possible, and they try and work with you as much as they possibly can. That's what they try and do, because the last thing we want is to be looked at how we can come across when people write about these things and they take a particular slant on it. They take a slant of, it's the comptroller's office catching someone doing something wrong. That's not what we try and do with our audits. Our audits are always meant to be helpful. Our audits are meant to be, here are some steps that you could take to improve your village, to improve your local municipality, and to improve the financial standing. I had a mayor reach out to me because last year he found, I think someone's trying to get, he's in.
Another trustee. Yes.
So, a mayor found his village on the list of what we call,
Stressed.
yes, the fiscal stress
Right.
monitoring system, for reasons that were completely beyond his control.
Mhm.
A bunch of people moved out of his area, and that was the reason, long and short, why his village was on the list, having nothing whatsoever to do with him or the work that he and his team had done. And he recognized that. They made some adjustments. They're off the list. That's it. So our audits and reports are always just meant to be helpful. That's always what they're meant to be, nothing more than that. And I always tell people that's the purpose. So
Once the audit begins, can you give me a ballpark estimate as to how long it generally takes to complete?
no.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because when I make the pitch, it goes in with a broad scope
Mhm.
to look at. And the pitch I've made that I would make is the same pitch that I've actually made to other mayors who've made the request. They say they're newly elected. I made the pitch also to Putnam County Executive Kevin Byrne when he first got elected in the beginning of this year. That was a request that he had made. County Executive George Latimer had also made that request. I think even County Executive Newhouse made that request when he was first elected back in, I'm going to say 2015, but I could be wrong about that number. And it was a broad scope. And then once we get a sense of how things are, we might hone in on a couple of different things here and there. So I can't tell you though until they start. That's the problem.
Of course, county audits are probably very different in terms of the amount of manpower and the documentation that's required.
Right.
I mean, there's a huge budgetary consideration.
Very different, yes.
But a village of our size, a small village with a staff of 3, a population of just over 600. Do you think it would be a 6-month process and it would be daily, or you just can't?
I really can't say. Part of it is I just don't know. And they do try and keep us separate from that process, because the other part of the issue is the controller himself is the most non-political person I know. He has said this, that if he didn't have to run for office and he could still do the job, he'd be really, really happy, because he hates putting politics anywhere near the work that we do, because it shouldn't be there. This is just about what's best for the village, what's best for the county, what's best for the state. And that's it. So none of our audits are at all politicized. And if it becomes that, we actually will just stop. We won't do it. We won't go in there. I've had audits rejected because, something that was unbeknownst to me that somebody else had known. And I said, no, it's too political. We can't get involved.
Trustees, any questions for Mr. Orlando before, with respect to what he's said up to this point?
This is Chris, nothing for me. Thanks.
This is Tinka, nothing so far.
Yep, nothing from me. It's Josh.
Okay, thanks. So moving beyond that, I sent Mr. Orlando the 2018 board audit. And the reason I sent it to him is I asked him to take a look at it. He may not have seen it before. And more specifically, I was interested in discussing with him and with the trustees what was recommended back in 2018. And to the extent that we're able to answer these questions today,
Right.
Both Elizabeth and myself and the other trustees who've all served longer than me on the board, I'd like to get a sense of how and to what extent we've complied with the recommendations, to the extent that we can comply with the recommendations. A lot of them involve IT, but there are some financial recommendations, which is of more concern to me personally.
Okay.
So what I have here, for example, is the first recommendation was segregate the incompatible duties of the clerk treasurer and the deputy clerk treasurer, or designate a board member to review their duties, including reviews of bank reconciliations for accuracy. So I would ask you, Elizabeth, because you're dealing with this directly, what are we doing now in terms of handling that particular issue?
As the clerk treasurer did everything, now we have another employee who does the deposits and enters the bills, pays them. She does.
Excuse me, can you speak a little bit higher, Elizabeth? I've had a hard time hearing what you said.
Sorry.
Thank
Can
you.
hear me now?
Yes, much better. You might want to move. Can you move the microphone closer to you or not?
Yeah, I will say everyone's pretty muted.
As far as that one goes.
So what I was saying was previously the clerk treasurer did everything financially. Now there's Denise, another employee, enters the deposits and enters the bills and pays the bills, and she does half the bank recs and I do the other half. She also signs off on my bank recs and I sign off on hers.
From your perspective, having heard that as an answer, do you think that is sufficient with respect to compliance with that particular recommendation?
So I'm going to have to say I don't have an answer to that one. And the reason I say that is my role at the Comptroller's office is not to review audits or the work that municipalities have or have not done to respond to the recommendations that we've made in audits. If that's a conversation that you'd like to have, I can reach out to our local government school accountability office and see if we can set something up in a virtual world where they can take a look at the 2018 review, and then we can have a conversation with them about how they feel about the progress that you've made. And that is what would be best if we want to go through all of those items.
Well, I think that's a fair recommendation, and I assume does any of the trustees have any comment on having a secondary meeting with the school of what's it, the school?
It's a local government school accountability office.
School accountability office, but they also are deal with villages, I guess, even though it's school
Correct.
accountability.
Local government school.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anybody have any problem with that? A second meeting?
Nothing for me.
Yep, makes sense.
Yeah, nothing for me.
Okay, all right. So we'll set that aside for now because that's not Mr. Orlando's field. So with respect to continuing the relationship, I think all of us would like to maintain a good relationship with the controller's office. We certainly appreciate the fact that you made yourself available to come down here today. And you know, our primary concern is the financial health of the village. My understanding is things are going well. The prior mayor indicated that you know, there's no stress here financially, so that's a good thing. I lived in a village of Suffern which had some stress applied to it, and that was of concern. So that's certainly a good thing. Anybody else have any comments for the representative at this point?
Yes, sounds like you're wrapping up, right? So I can ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so I don't think Josh was on the call when we first discussed that there was a board audit in 2018 of the board. My question is it a 5-year cycle generally, or was that requested by someone on the board back then, or how does that?
That's a great question. I was not part of the controller's office in 2018 or the year prior, which is probably when the process for the audit would have started. So I don't know how it came onto the schedule for the village to be audited back in 2018. Typically, what we try and do is go through. We are required by law to audit every school district every 2 years. We are required by law to do that. When we try and go through the municipalities, we try and keep, I don't know the exact number of years, but we try and keep up and review as many as we can. Now, bear in mind, there's 62 counties in the state of New York. In Westchester County alone, I believe there's at least 40 municipalities, and that's just one county. So we try and keep up. The auditors do as best they can to be as frequent as these audits need to be. Sometimes the audits happen more frequently because of various reporting reasons. For you brought up Suffern, for example, we still go back to Suffern, I think, every year to do a review of their budget. Same thing with the city of Newburgh. So it depends on the individual location also. And then there are instances where we'll get a new elected official who will request a audit or review of their municipality, county, so on.
Well, the prior mayor was elected in 2017, so that would. I'm not saying that he requested it, but the request for that resulted in the 2018 report may have started with him in 2017, but we don't know that for sure.
Correct.
And that was a board audit. Do you have any idea, because I don't know the answer to this, when was the last time the village was subject to a financial audit?
Oh, if it predates 2018, it may not be logged digitally on our system quite yet. So I would have to go back and look and see when the last time the village was audited, but it probably was a while ago, because I remember meeting with the previous mayor in this room, and I had brought the 2018 report with me to give him as a copy. And you know, he said that it had been a while before that since they had been reviewed. So I will get back to you on that. And the last time was you were audited financially.
Yeah, financially, because that's what we may be looking at. And the question is, you know, what's a good period of time between financial audits? 10 years, 20 years? I mean, there's got to be some sort of parameter for, you know, even if you can't make that, you can't make that parameter, those
Right.
parameters, because you're just so overburdened with all these municipalities. What's the recommended time frame between audit A and audit B?
Right. I mean, I can't speak to that. It really depends on the individual municipality. I mean, you have 600 residents,
Right.
as you said. You know, this isn't Port Jervis.
No.
Right. You know, it's probably a much smaller budget. It's probably, I'm sure you have quite a few snowbirds in the area.
Right.
So it really depends on what you need. What I do often see from other municipalities is I do see them do an outside consultant every year as part of their normal budgetary process, as someone to come in not to say that you're not doing a good job,
That's quite all right.
that just to give a different perspective on the books and see, is this a good idea, a good proposal? What's the money say? You know, things like
We
that.
have an accounting firm.
There you go. So then that would really be the only suggestion that I would have. It's just something that I've seen is good best practice. From the perspective of asking the controller's office for a review from a financial perspective, we're always happy to answer questions. Our local government school accountability shop is great at it, and they provide very specific instructions on what you should do, what our recommendations are, and they'll work with you directly also if you prefer that. And so there really isn't a time where you should be thinking of following up with me or whether you should wait. You can always reach out. I'm very available. I've come to Orange County all the time. I'll actually be coming back tomorrow. Fortunately, it looks like Bear Mountain is still closed, which is no fun for me, but I'll be making my way here. So please, feel free to reach out if you have questions or things like that. And we can, again, if there is consensus, I always say consensus because I want everyone to be comfortable with the idea of doing a financial review. We can always talk again about doing that later down the road if that's something that everyone wants.
Okay, great. Any of the trustees, other questions or comments?
Not for me. Thanks, Mayor.
Sure. Chris?
No, nothing for me. I appreciate listening though. Thanks.
Trustee Shaw, anything further?
No, that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you all. John didn't put on the record button, but I think the substance of our meeting has been recorded. I'll now end the conversation. Thank you all for attending. We'll see you on
Thank
the
you.
20th. We'll see
All
you
right,
on the
thanks.
20th.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.